Hey, podcast listeners. Today we're going to talk about critical thinking. So, I am excited to discuss this topic we do not discuss nearly enough. I'm going to talk about my understanding of the 12-step program, and I want to preface it with all you're going to hear today is criticism of 12-step from what I have gleaned as a therapist and my own experience in 12-step. There's a lot of good that I'm not going to name. There's lots and lots of good within the 12-step community that I'm not going to reflect on. So please don't think all I'm doing is bashing. I am critical thinking and I am sharing those criticisms, but that doesn't mean that I don't also appreciate all of what it's done for so many people worldwide. So let's keep that in mind and let's talk about the power of critical thinking, or maybe the dangers of not having enough of it. So, unquestioning loyalty should never be given to any group, ideology, or institution. I've always believed in the past that 12-step was an amazing self-help structure for people in recovery, but recently learned that, alas, it's no different than any other human institution when unchallenged by critical thinking. Here's an example. My friend Dan recently shared with me that a few years ago, his good friend started drinking with the intent to kill himself out of nowhere, suddenly. And as he watched, he started piecing things together that this friend's drinking overlapped with right when the friend had lost a large amount of his family's money by making a very bad investment. And so he felt a lot of shame around this and was trying to kill himself through his alcoholism. So Dan went to his parents and actually told him his suspicion and entreated them to tell their son that he is absolutely forgiven for his offense. And they did. And guess what? The friend immediately ceased drinking. So thank God Dan did this. However, when he told me this, he told me he was strongly discouraged from intervening in this way by two other friends of theirs who were in the 12-step program. They told Dan that he was not following 12-step protocol by detaching from someone who is active in their addiction and allowing them to naturally hit rock bottom. Now, Dan responded that he knows that this approach is very effective for many people, but that he also knew that in this friend's case, it wouldn't work because he was about to die from the level of alcoholism he was engaged with. And he also knew that the parents and their forgiveness was what was going to end the friend's binge drinking. So unfortunately, the other friends did not support him. And they did this because their adherence to the 12-step ideology was so strong, they thought it should never be questioned. And they had a one-size-fits-all approach to the solution of alcoholism. Thank God Dan didn't believe this and he wasn't dissuaded. And thank God that Dan is someone who is an excellent critical thinker. I recently also learned that even though 12-step ideology promotes personal autonomy when it comes to choosing what higher power that you align yourself with, what it doesn't support is if that higher power is you. In fact, there are maxims within 12-step that say things like, when you trust yourself, you're trusting an idiot. Now, please don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that we should idealize or idolize ourselves. I'm not saying that we all shouldn't have a healthy skepticism to not believing that our motives are not pure. Wait, I'm saying this way wrong. To questioning our motives. We should all question our motives for doing things. We should all have a healthy skepticism with ourselves. Yes, that is fine. But what are we doing when we are not applying that same healthy skepticism to everything else, including the 12-step model and their philosophy? When we make it infallible, aren't we tacitly making 12-step our higher power when we don't have a healthy skepticism of it as well? I also know how powerful it can be for people to work the steps, such as having a fearless moral inventory of oneself and making amends with others. Unfortunately, the people who most need to do these things, to see their own character defects and to make amends, are the people least likely to join a 12-step group. And the people most likely to do these steps and join the groups are the codependents who are always blaming themselves for everything when the problem is actually the people around them. We could also critique the 12-step model of all or nothing relationship to the addiction, as they promote abstinence alone in contrast to healing our relationship with our addiction, which is more a harm reduction approach, which is actually very much supported with a lot of evidence to be very effective as well. I don't like that 12-step defines success as sobriety pretty much only versus becoming a healthy, whole human being. When I've attended meetings in the past, I've witnessed people share their sobriety stories, but then smoke like a chimney during the break and still have the same mental health issues as when they were active in their addiction. There's no emphasis really put on healing or wholeness overall. The problem, however, is not the 12-step ideology, but its inherent rigidity, which keeps it from evolving and improving as over time, better philosophies and understandings become apparent. It's the resistance to feedback and critique from others that is the problem. It's the commitment to certainty above humility and collaboration. This problem is not unique to 12-step. This ivory tower impermeability infiltrates every aspect of our society, including our medical and educational institutions. For instance, many of us go to doctors expecting to find solutions they simply do not offer because we don't realize how indoctrinated the medical personnel are in a narrow Western model. You know that phrase that when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail? That applies to today's medical professionals who are trained to only see solutions in surgery and pharmaceuticals. I hear so many stories of people going to a doctor unconsciously believing the doctor can do something more than pharmaceuticals and surgery for them. I recall a client telling me how he told his doctor about his anxiety, and he was actually really hurt when all she offered was medication. And I remember thinking to myself, what were you expecting her to offer? I see parents who take their young children to the doctor when they're sick, and I think to myself, what do you think that doctor has to offer these sick children that them just resting and drinking plenty of fluids and healing naturally isn't going to do for them? Or all the stories I've heard where people are told by a doctor that they will never walk again, that they will never recover from their chronic disease, or that their children will never function normally. And how wrong all those prognoses were. Apparently, modern medicine is trained also to never have hope. We need to employ critical thinking to realize just how Western society has ascribed to a false dichotomy between what is physical and emotional, as most human disease in our country is somatic, meaning it is a physical manifestation of psychological illness. And today's medicine can only mitigate symptoms and will never treat the root problem. Now, my daughter, who is now a sociology major in college, taught me about what is known as the banking method of teaching. It comes from the work of Paulo Freire, the author of the famous book, Pedagogy of the Oppressed. It's the philosophy that children are empty vessels to be filled with knowledge by a teacher, similar to making a deposit at the bank. This method is criticized for being dehumanizing and limiting active participation of children in their own learning. This pedagogy is very much the foundation of our education system in the West, even today, which limits the ability of children to think critically. Critical thinking is not a class that we're supposed to take in college. No, it is something that all of us should learn and practice and engage in every single day. Please hear me. I am not anti-institution or anti-12-step. I am anti-rigidity and anti-certainty. I'm for institutions and organizations that listen to their constituents and change as necessary, employing a more democratic style of system where every voice matters and everyone has a voice. That doesn't mean there won't be leaders, that it'll be anarchy or communism. No. Why can't leaders in education, medicine, and self-help strive to employ democratic principles that our country was founded upon? A leader who does this is the ultimate definition of a true leader. Someone who is secure enough in herself to not be threatened by differing thoughts and ideologies. Someone wise enough to see the truth within those opposing beliefs and apply and respond to those as is best. I dream of a world where critical thinking is welcomed by leaders and adults everywhere, even the critical thinking of children. Wouldn't that be a wonderful place to live, where we all matter? I think that's the world God has for us. Let's make it a reality, one voice at a time. Thanks for listening, guys.